Today we're going to talk about a very interesting subject. I found a Torah from the Baal Shem Tov that connects Shabbat with the idea of giving a hug. And it really connects to some things that we've probably seen in our generation. And I think the people will appreciate and recognize this as we go into the description, how much Rabbi Shlomo Carlebach represented and tried to live this Torah. It seems superficial at first, and then it becomes extremely profound. So in the name of the Baal Shem Tov, we are told, when we read the words on Shabbat, Yechabek la Ba'ala, that the husband and the bride embrace, they hug. B'yasoda dilah, at the deepest level. כשאדם מעלה מדרגה תחתונה לפני השם יתברך יותר חשוב. So the Rav begins, when a person elevates a level beneath him, before Hashem, so this statement is very important. The whole idea of Shabbat is that the higher level in Shemayim, what we call Zer Anpin, goes down to the level of Malchut and lifts it up. Malchut, of course, is pure judgment in the tree of life. It's the lowest Shira. It's this Shira that deals with this world, the Shira of judgment, of God's throne, of God's judging the world. And we certainly feel that during the week. And on Shabbat, we certainly, hopefully with Hashem's help, we feel the court is closed for the day, that Shabbat comes and there's no more of this judgment that so easily felt during the week. And so this is the idea that the masculine form, Zer Anpin, goes down and attaches to the feminine form, Malchut. These two energies unite and elevate on Shabbat. So that's a little explanation of this idea of Yechabek la Ba'ala that the Arizal sings about in his famous tune that we sing on Shabbat, Azamar B'Shvachim, that the husband embraces the wife. Okay. And he says this is an extremely precious thing to Hashem when somebody elevates somebody else. Or when we take one level and lift it up to a higher level. ופרשנו להבין מעט דבריו כי עניין החיבוק הוא ייחוד הוויה אלוקים. So now we've explained, the Rav says, to understand a little of his words, and the idea of this embrace, this hug, is the idea of the name Yud Kei Vav Kei unifying with the name Elokim. That these two holy names of Hashem, which represent two levels in the tree of life, are unified. The name of creation, the creative force, and the name of God as judge. That the name of judgment is too powerful and too severe for a human being to bear. And the name of creation has the power to sweeten that. The power to soften the edges of the judgment, if you will. Now he goes on to tell us another secret. Ma shenivra besod lev Elokim. And this is what is created in the secret of the 32 pathways of wisdom. Now the 32 pathways of wisdom are the 22 letters and the 10 sfirot. And they create that very familiar diagram that you've seen in many Kabbalah books of the 10 sfirot connected by the 22 letters. Well, these 32 pathways are called the Lev Netivot Elokim, the 32 pathways of God. Dafka of Elokim, because this is the union of the Creator and the Judge. And it's happening in the heart. And certainly there are times where we can feel the Creator in our heart, and there's certainly times where we can feel the judgment in our heart, and the two need to be worked out together. Now, when it comes to kavanot of the Arizal, and when a person's on the level that his mind is clear enough, he can see these letters in his mind shining and unify them into one name of 9 letters. That's a higher level. It's appropriate for the right person, the right time. But it doesn't mean that you don't perform the unification if you're not able to see it in your mind's eye, because it's happening throughout creation and it's happening in the heart. And even if the mind is not clear enough yet or expert enough with the meditations, their heart can still conceive of and unify these powers. And this again is this idea of Havaya and Elokim together. And now he tells us something very interesting. By doing so, we elevate souls from the klipa. Now, this generally means people who are far from Hashem, who don't even know there's one God, people that don't keep the Torah, people that are attached to many things that we don't want to be attached to. And the classic name is in Kabbalah is klipot, which means the shells. Those shells are a metaphoric name for the unclean filters that separate us from the infinite. And by doing this unification at the spiritual level, the level of Shabbat, and at the level of the kavanot in the mind and the heart, seeing the letters, hearing the letters, a person can pull people out of the dark places. Now, of course, that includes ourselves. We have to pull ourselves out. But amazingly, this is because we live in an integrated network of soul. You know, they should have a TV channel, INS, Integrative Network of Soul. Because that's really where we live, folks. And when we do something good like this, it pulls people out of the darkness, even with one thought. And now, with all of that said, my friends, listen to what he goes on. Ki gam b'shiflut madrega naseh yichud chibuk havaya elokim. Even from the lowest of the levels, we make the unification of Havaya Elokim, the Creator and the Judge, because that lowest of levels is Elokim. And this creates pleasure. And Naicha is rest for the Shekhinah, a resting place for the Shekhinah, which of course is Shabbat. Ki ein l'Shekhinah nachat v'naicha ela lemi sheyodeh le'ached b'yichudim b'chol ha'choveh. Now this is an interesting secret. It should be announced in every Kabbalistic yeshiva and every book in the world of Kabbalah. The Rav says that the Shekhinah has no pleasure and rest except for somebody who knows how to unify these names or Yichudim b'chol ha'hoveh in all of reality. In other words, it's not enough to sit on a mountaintop and do a yichud, to meditate on God's names. in everything we have to do it. We have to look for those connections wherever we go. And that includes when you're Reb Shlomo Carlebach going out to reach out to people in ashrams, giving them hugs. Now, my assumption is that Reb Shlomo had learnt the Torahs of the Baal Shem Tov very well, and the Torahs of the Arizal and Rabbi Nachman very well. Now, whether this Torah motivated him to go out and give hugs, he did do it. And maybe it came from his learning, and maybe it came from his own neshama. But wouldn't this be a nice Torah to tell somebody who's speaking improperly about Reb Shlomo? Wouldn't it be a good idea that they knew the kavanot of this power of giving a hug? Unfortunately, I've heard these kinds of talks, and it's too bad I hadn't learned this before. Okay, that's the way things roll. But you see how powerful that this embrace, this hug can be, because it really is the idea of not just hugging somebody, but you're really lifting them out of where they are to a new place. And that is very precious to Hashem. And that gives life force from one to another. And that life force can be very important to a person who's on the brink of despair and depression and sadness and loneliness. Because the hug, he goes on to tell us, Asher yesh b'zeh bitul klipot v'neichel shechinta, that this causes the nullification of these negative forces, these external unclean filters, and pleasure and rest for the Shekhinah. You know, why does the Shekhinah need rest? It's a divine thing, but not so simple. See, the Shekhinah is compared to many things. One of them is a deer, and a deer is a very fidgety, very sensitive creature. And it's also very vulnerable. So it can take off in a split second when it hears the crack of a twig in the forest. You know, we have deer running around the mountains out here, and, you know, they get the scent of a human being and they're on the run. So if that's a metaphor for the Shekhinah, it's telling us something about the sensitivity of the Shekhinah, that it's not a simple thing to find a place to rest in a world of noise, impurity, running around all the time. It's not a simple thing for the divine to rest in a place that is not appropriate, that is not created for it. You know, you don't see deers running around, you know, midtown Manhattan for a reason. It's too stressful for a deer. What can I tell you? Now he goes on to tell us, well, it gives us another secret that's very interesting, that the Shekhinah, there's this level of breaking after breaking. Katishin literally means the crushing. Katush. And so the crushing is Neichel tzadikaya. It is pleasant for the righteous to be broken. And essentially, it means brokenhearted. Now, this is not the brokenheartedness of depression. It is not the brokenheartedness of loss, or sadness, or regret. It is the broken-heartedness of love. And then for a tzaddik, he wants to be broken over and over for Hashem. Because that creates this place for the rest of the Shekhinah. The Shekhinah, you have to imagine, it's trying to come into a place, but it can't stay there. It can't rest there. Because people are full of noise. People are full of contradictions. People are full of negative feelings. And all of those just drive away the divine presence. The divine presence attaches to joy, pure joy. And of course, the highest joy is joy for no reason at all. Okay, you can obviously having joy because we have a creator is also a very high thing. That we have a Torah, that we have tzaddikim. But there is joy for pure joy's sake. There's nothing to do with me or you or anybody. And that high joy is where the Shekhinah wants to dwell. That's what she is connected to. And so by this idea of this crushing, this breaking that happens in the heart, we're actually molding a place for the divine. And this is not easy work, folks. But the Zohar says like this, Adalo delike dirkit be nehiru dinishmata divatishin be vidlok. A piece of wood that is not lighting nicely, that is not lighting on fire, what do you do to it in your campfire? And we're talking about the fire of your soul. When the fire of your soul is like a log and it doesn't want to light, what do? You strike it with a poker or with a stick or your camping boot, whatever it is. And then the log starts to light. So this is the idea here. That sometimes the Shem has to strike a person in order for his light to shine. And this is pretty tough. Now, my assumption is that every person wants to be a tzaddik or a tzaddikis, because inside you really are. It's just hidden from us. You know, if I told you you had a treasure deep inside your house, you wouldn't sell your house. You would go and try to find it. And so too our divine spark of soul. But sometimes there needs to be a little kick, a little poke on the log to get the fire lit. Okay, and this is a metaphor, of course, for what we're talking about in terms of the shining, this creating a place for the Shekhinah to dwell. Now, most people don't go around wanting to have a broken heart. But the Alter Rebbe of Chabad said, there is no wholeness like a broken heart. Because the brokenness really reconnects the pieces. It creates a new wholeness. And this, Machamat sheyesh nachat ruach l'kadosh baruch hu. This gives pleasantness to Hashem. And nachat ruach, if you translate the words, is very interesting. It literally means the resting of the spirit. That Hashem's spirit can dwell in this world. Shat tzadik ma'alei madriga ketana miyached shem kudsha b'richu shchinte. That when a tzaddik elevates, something that's fallen, it gives a lot of pleasure to Hashem. Of course, that includes us, but I think it might be more pleasurable to Hashem when we help elevate others. Bechreach latzidik lired, and therefore it's necessary for the righteous to go down in order to elevate those who have fallen. B'chrei shelo yipol halil al madrigato sovel, and in order that the tzaddik does not fall from his true level, he suffers yisurin ubatashim, and he suffers all kinds of pain in order not to fall from his true level, but to enable him to go down. You know, this is like woven into every adventure story in Hollywood, that the hero has to go to some dark, dangerous, deep, threatening place in order to save something. Usually it's the princess or the treasure, or save the world. That's all a metaphor for what the Kabbalah and the Chassidut and the Baal Shem Tov is teaching us. And through this, there's a great elevation and praise and salvation with a wondrous light. That we really have to go down to go up. There's no such thing as the continuous elevation. There has to be the up and the down. But if you look at it from a little perspective, you see that it's really always going up. It's just there are dips in the going up. So I think this is a wonderful teaching, and let's connect it back to Shabbat, because we started with the idea this isn't just happening for the righteous. It's happening for the whole creation through the weekly cycle of the weekdays and Shabbat. That the Shabbat is lifting up the weekdays, just like Zah lifts up Nukva, and just like the Abba elevates the Ima, the king elevates the queen. There is this reciprocal elevation taking place. On the cosmic level, on the individual level, and of course on the level of Am Yisrael. That Am Yisrael is called the Queen of Hashem, his resting place. And this is not simply a religiocentric idea. It's by virtue of being descendants of Abraham. It's not because we're such great guys, we're born Jewish, and therefore we've got the keys to the kingdom, as some other religions like to say. No, it's because we have this spiritual genetic connection with Abraham, who was given the job in the first place. So this is called paying our dues. That we have to go down and up and down and up in order to elevate that which is around us. And certainly for someone like Reb Shlomo Carlebach, who was a tzaddik, who gave his life to Am Yisrael, who served Am Yisrael day and night and day, for decades, and reached out to the farthest places of Yiddishkeit and the world itself. Reb Shlomo reached out to all people, wherever he was, and he gave hugs to people, and now look what a hug really does. The hug unifies the judgment and the creation. And that gives a vessel to the highest light and sweetens that lower vessel. I just had a silly idea, but maybe it's not so silly. But you go to court, that judge, he has a gavel. He has a hammer. What a pleasant thing to start a meeting with, a hammer. Bam! Why don't they start the meeting with a song or a pleasant note from a violin? No, a hammer. Take that hammer and you turn it into something soft. You turn it into something that, like the butcher uses a hammer, but he's softening the meat. Right? The carpenter uses the hammer to make a house, which is a place of rest. So you have the idea of the din, of the idea of judgment, and then you have the idea of the sweetening. Even in something as simple as a hammer. There's a lot of judgment that goes into building a house, or building anything for that matter. But in the end, the product is very sweet. So I hope this is helpful and illuminating and gives us something to think about and work on Shabbat. And ultimately, I hope it helps us go out and hug people when we need to. And even when we don't know if we need to, or we're not sure, or we don't want to, that's oftentimes the time we really must. So I want to bless everyone with a holy Shabbos, a Shabbos that's sweet. This is, we're entering the times of Tammuz and Av. These are times of judgment. These are times where Esav took the months, he received the months of din from Hashem, corresponding to his character. And so it's a hard time for the Jewish people. It always has been. And until the final redemption, the final sweetening, the final judgment, where the whole world is elevated to a new level, which I don't know when it's going to be. It's happening, photon by photon. It's happening light by light, moment by moment, good deed by good deed. That we'll all experience that together. And right now we'll have to be satisfied with little moments of it, but we have Shabbat. Shabbat is a great moment for all of us. Shabbat Shalom. We'll see you next week on Patreon. And hopefully I'll be able to give you a smile and not just a voice. Ay, ay, ay. When you have a little illness, it teaches you a little bit about that din, about that judgment. Because that's what's happening. But the Torah and learning and sharing together, this is where the sweetening takes place as well. So be in touch with us, enjoy what we have to offer, and look forward to seeing you next week. All the best.